Everyone to tonight's meeting of the Urban Planning Delegated Committee. For some, I'd like to say welcome back, because I believe some of the gallery have probably been here before on these issues. And to my returning fellow councillors, welcome back again, all voted in very convincingly by their communities. But a special welcome to 7 new councillors tonight. All have also been through very competitive competitions with convincing wins at the end of it. So I'm given a few weeks with my fellows around this chamber. I believe we've got a very hard-working cooperative council, and I'm looking forward to the next year working together. So moving on, welcome everyone. So before commencing this meeting, I request that all mobile telephones are turned off or switched to silent. Thank you very much. My name is Councillor Westgott, and I'm chair of this committee. I will start by introducing my fellow councillors. Seated to my left is Councillor Lisa Hollingsworth, Councillor Shima Ibuki, Councillor Sophie Tornay, our Mayor, Councillor Mick Nolan, or Michael, as the case may be, Councillor Felicity Sinfield, and on the other side of the chamber, Councillor Victor Franco, Councillor Mal Osborne-Smith, Councillor Rob Ballier, and Councillor Chris Pattis. I also acknowledge Manager Governance and Legal, Mr. Brian Wee, to my left, and Director of Urban Planning, Mr. Scott Walker, to my right. There are other officers in the chamber, and they will be introduced as they report to us this evening. So, as a general introduction, the Urban Planning Delegated Committee meeting is being live streamed on Council's YouTube channel to enable public viewing during the meeting. The meeting is also being recorded and will be made available on Council's YouTube as soon as practicable after the meeting. The primary purpose of the Urban Planning Delegated Committee is to deal with issues under the Planning and Environment Act and the Building Act. This committee has delegated powers to make decisions on behalf of Council. So for those presenting this evening, when it comes to your agenda item at which you're presenting, it will be first reduced by an officer. I will then call you one by one to come forward to the head of the horseshoe table and address us. If you're making submission, please present your viewpoints clearly and concisely on why you support or oppose the application. Please do not repeat what earlier speakers have said, and keep to the submission focused on relevant issues and points not previously raised. If you're, not strictly speaking planning applications, but I'll go through the motions of this tonight anyway. If you're opposing the planning application, please tell the committee why you disagree and suggest alternative approaches that would satisfy your concerns. Please focus on your concerns rather than matters of history or any details in the officer's report. There is a strict 3-minute limit for each speaker, including councillors, and whilst I chair this meeting and can vary that time, I seldom do. At the 2.5-minute mark, we will ring a little bell, and that indicates that you have 30 seconds left to complete your presentation. For those in the gallery this evening, I would like to take this opportunity to remind you to extend due courtesy and respect to each other and the committee as a whole, and refrain from inappropriate behaviour. This includes remaining quiet while others are addressing the meeting and not displaying disruptive behaviour during the decision-making process of the committee. You may only address the council with the consent of the chair, and you must take directions from the chairperson whenever called to do so. Where members of the committee are disruptive or fail to comply with this direction, the chairperson may ask for you to be removed from the chamber. And just to finish, I would like to encourage all submitters, officers and councillors to speak directly into the microphone to ensure that we will all hear what is being said. So, I now move to apologies. Mr. Wee, are there any apologies this evening?
Through you, Chair, Councillor Fred Pereira is an apology this evening.
Thank you. We now move into the minutes for the previous meeting. Councillors, can I please have a motion to adopt and confirm the minutes of our previous meeting on the 7th of October 2024, for those that were there? Councillor Sinfield.
So moved.
Do I have a seconder on that? Councillor Ballieu.
Seconded.
Thank you very much. Is anyone opposed to the minutes of the previous meeting? Nobody. I will now put the motion. All of those in favour? Anyone against? None. Carried unanimously. Thank you. We will now move to declaration of conflict of interest for councillors and council officers. Councillors and council officers, are there any conflicts of interest that you wish to foreshadow for the meeting's agenda tonight? There are none. Thank you. So we can move directly into the body of the meeting. We'll move to item 3.1, 508 to 510 Burke Road, Camberwell. Heritage Overlay Outcomes of the Exhibition, Amendment C405 Borough. Tonight, the officer presenting, Emile Dixon, Senior Strategic Planner, Heritage, will present for us. Thank you. Emile Dixon is unwell, so Christian will present to us this evening. Williamson, thank you.
Thank you, and through your chair. Good evening, councillors and members of the community. The purpose of this report is to inform the Urban Planning Delegated Committee of the outcomes of the exhibition process for Amendment C405 Borough, which seeks to apply a permanent heritage overlay over the property at 508 to 510 Burke Road in Camberwell. The property is known as Bearable. And the property had previously been proposed for inclusion in the heritage overlay as part of the 2017 Camberwell Heritage Gap Study. At that time, it was part of a broader precinct extension. The independent planning panel appointed to consider submissions at the time recommend that precinct extension be abandoned. In early 2023, Council received new information on the architect of the property, and as a result of that, and under Council's then newly adopted community heritage nomination process, a new heritage assessment was commissioned to investigate whether the site warrants protection as an individually significant property. The assessment carried out by Council's heritage expert concluded that the property was worthy of protection, and Council undertook preliminary consultation on a draft heritage citation in from November to February. In March 2024, earlier this year, the Urban Planning Delegated Committee resolved to adopt the heritage citation and seek authorisation from the Minister for Planning to commence the formal planning scheme amendment process. That authorisation was granted, and Council prepared exhibition of the amendment, which ran from the 20th of August to the 23rd of September this year. 49 submissions were received as a result of the consultation. That included 4 opposing submissions and 45 supporting submissions. The opposing submissions generally raised concerns around the overuse of the heritage overlay, the lack of aesthetic value of the property, and suggestions that the property would be better used for multi-dwelling development. All submissions, including the supporting ones, were considered and reviewed by Council officers and Council's heritage consultants, and the report sets out the response to each of those submissions and the key issues raised. Officers are not recommending any changes to the heritage citation or the recommendation to include the property in the heritage overlay, and we're seeking a resolution from the committee to refer submissions to an independent planning panel for consideration. The planning panel will hold a public hearing and will then provide recommendations to Council as to how it should proceed. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. Before those questions, we have a couple in our audience tonight have indicated that they wish to speak on the matter. Pleased to say that 2 are registered as being in support of the recommendation. So once I've announced your name, if you please, as I mentioned before, come forward and join us at the horseshoe table. And I remind you there is a strict 3-minute limit on your presentation. But I'd ask you to start with your name and the suburb in which you live. So tonight we'll start with Annette Cooper. If you'd come forward and join us, thank you.
Hello, my name's Annette Cooper and I'm a resident of Camberwell.
Thank you.
I'm reading this on behalf of Christina Brannigan of the Burundara Heritage Group, who unfortunately can't be here tonight. Thank you to the officers and councillors who have supported the work assessing this house at 508 Burke Road, Camberwell. I support the officers' recommendations due to the architectural and historical significance of the design of the house and the importance of its architect, Christopher Cowper. Cowper was an architect who strongly influenced Burundara's character from the 1890s to the late 1920s. He was a resident of Burundara, residing in Linda Crescent, Hawthorn, and later in Studley Park Road, Kew. He was renowned for the Queen Anne houses he built in Melbourne's middle ring suburbs of Brighton, Kew, Hawthorn, Camberwell and Canterbury. He is recognised by experts as one of Victoria's foremost architects of the Federation Queen Anne style. He is best known for his extensive residential development of Queen Anne homes in Grace Park, Hawthorn, where he designed 33 houses. In his later residential work, however, as we see at 508 Burke Road, Cowper favoured the attic bungalow. Examples of his extensive work include an attic villa at 71 Broadway, Camberwell, several in Toorak, and innovative shops and flats in St Kilda. The Heritage Report states that one of the reasons Barrabool at 508 is so important to conserve is because the house illustrates the later part of Cowper's oeuvre and provides the missing link in Cowper's work between late Federation-era attic bungalows and fully fledged interwar bungalows of the late 1920s. In fact, it states the following: in considering Cowper's oeuvre within the city of Burundara, there is nothing even closely comparable. The study confirms that it's a great piece of architecture, constructed and designed by craftsmen. It also records a time in Camberwell when most GPs worked from home and deserves to be conserved as the work of one of our foremost local and Victorian architects. The house meets criteria A, D and H, the latter being a criterion we are rarely able to use. It's a special place, and sadly for us in Camberwell, one of the few original surviving homes of the Sunnyside estate. Council tried to protect a number of houses in this estate, but unfortunately it was not to be. And now many of the heritage grade, early 20th century houses have been demolished, most replaced by huge single houses on large lots, boundary to boundary, not designed by architects nor built by craftspeople. Typically, they provide no benefit to the community in terms of increased housing or more affordable homes, and are destroying the garden suburb that this part of Camberwell was once so famous for. Please support the officers' recommendations before we lose this important remaining rare example. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillors, are there any questions of this speaker?
I don't know if I can answer them.
There are none. Thank you very much for your presentation, Ms.
Thank you.
Cooper. I now call upon Pamela Donoghue to join us at the table.
Good evening. My name is actually Paula Donoghue, not Pamela.
My
Anyway,
apologies.
That's okay. I do live in Camberwell. Along with my late husband, we were the fourth owners of 508 Burke Road. We did do renovations and we were very careful to follow Christopher Cowper's rules with windows, with the LED light. We had to replace the glass in the double front doors and the back door. The glass happened to be thicker, which incurred extra cost because we had to wait for the right size LED to redo that. Also, there was a comment about the gooseneck downpipes. They had rusted out. We had them made brand new in exactly the same style as Christopher Cowper had designed. I was in the house when an architect came to check the house for the current owner. The architect said the house was solid. He could give no reason for it to be demolished. I was there when the arbiter was there. He said he could give no reason for any of the trees to be felled. We wish to maintain the garden suburb look of Camberwell. It's part of Sunnyside Estate. There was always the setback from Burke Road, and that has been maintained by council, and we thank you for that. So we just want to maintain the leafy streets along with the history of Camberwell, and I think that'll do for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, councillors, if you just wait 1 second, just in case there's any questions. Councillors, do you have any questions of this speaker? There are none. Thank you very much for your presentation.
There's more to talk about privately, but that'll do for now.
Thank you. I will now return to the officers for matters arising.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Thanking the speakers tonight for their support for the officer recommendation. And I think there are any matters that need to be raised that haven't already been addressed in the report. Thank you.
Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers? Councillor Franco.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, on page 8 of the report, page 8, page 9 of the report, it states a condition of authorisation from the Minister required deletion of criterion H, questioning that there was a special connection, they're the words used, to the architect Christopher Cowper. Could officers explain if they still consider the property to have been a Christopher Cowper house, and what the word special connection mean when the Minister says there's no special connection?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. To your first question, yes, it's undisputed that the house was designed by Christopher Cowper. That's not been questioned by the department or the Minister's delegate either, so there's no question over that. That's not of a dispute. What the department is saying is that it hasn't been demonstrated that this house has a specific significance associated with the architect, because the main body of his work was associated with Queen Anne Federation style. This house is an in-between one, so they don't think that there is a specific relationship that can be demonstrated to a level that would satisfy criterion H.
Thank you. And just to follow on, but they were satisfied that the other two criterion were sound?
Yes, they raised no concerns over the other two criteria. And just to clarify, in order for a place to warrant protection in the heritage overlay, only one of the 8 criteria needs to be satisfied. So that wasn't fatal to the recommendation to include in the heritage overlay.
One final question, Chair, and this relates to the officer's recommendation, point 6. Point 6 says authorise the Director of Urban Living to undertake administrative changes to the amendment. Are there specific administrative changes that officers currently have in mind, or is this an if required?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. It's an if required only. Sometimes matters may arise in the process of an amendment, and rather than having to take those administrative matters back to a UPDC for a decision where they don't change the intent of the amendment, it's procedurally easier for the Director of Urban Living to make certain changes.
Thank you, and I just mentioned I'll foreshadow a motion at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Councillor Franco. Councillor Pattis.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I just want to get it clarified that the reason the officers are suggesting or have the current recommendation, which is different to the original recommendation, it's not just to do with the fact that we now know who the architect was, that we've got further reasons now for for this to be aligned to heritage criteria? Because the way that I read the report originally, it sort of seemed as if the reason we're protecting this one, or the reason we're moving heritage on this one now, whereas before we didn't, is to do with the fact that we now know who the architect is. Could you please maybe clarify that it's not just about the architect?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. It's not just about the architect. As you know, Criterion H was not accepted by the department, and it is likely that even if we didn't know who the architect was, that Criterion A and D would still be satisfied. The reason it's presented in this report is that because the place had previously been considered as part of a precinct extension, and Council's community heritage nomination process required new information to be available, that new information about Christopher Cowper being the architect was effectively the trigger for officers to commission a new heritage assessment. That heritage assessment was based on the site being an individually significant site. So all the research, all the assessment against the criteria were done at the individual property level, whereas previously in the 2017 study, it was done at the precinct level, where the level of detail that you have or that's being undertaken is at the precinct level. It doesn't go into the level of detail for each individual property. So, for example, information that you have in the current citation around the use of it as a residence and a medical clinic, doctor's surgery, that actually wasn't addressed in the original precinct citation. So that forms now part of the reason to satisfy Criterion H. So it's not just the architect.
That appears. Oh, Councillor Franco.
One follow-up question, which is triggered by my colleague's question. The original heritage review, whilst it was a precinct one, did still identify the property, did it not, as a significant one in terms of its heritage value?
Thank you, through it. Yes, it did. It identified as a significant, and it identified that the place met Criterion D. It specifically mentioned, if you go back to that citation that was prepared at the time in relation to its aesthetic significance, it didn't talk about its associative significance because it wasn't known that it was designed by Christopher Cowper, and it didn't make any reference to Criterion A being satisfied with regards to that property. So it's not a new place, but the amount of detail that goes into an individual property assessment compared to a precinct is obviously very different.
That now appears to have exhausted all questions. Thank you very much. We might return to you, Councillor Franco, for a motion you were prepared to move.
I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation, just adding on point 6 somewhere, authorise the Director of Urban Living, if required, to undertake, add the words if required. After administrative changes, if required.
You happy with that, Councillor Franco?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have a seconder to that motion as amended?
I'm happy.
Councillor Hollingsworth? Oh, hang on, we're jumping.
Yes, happy to second, thank you.
Councillor Hollingsworth. Happy to second that? Is there anyone opposed? It's unopposed. Councillor Franco, would you like to speak briefly to your motion? Thank you.
Very briefly, this has been with Boroondara Council for quite some years. It's simply the next stage to refer this to a panel, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I will now put the motion. All of those in favour? Is anyone against? Just checking. No, it's unanimous. That I declare it carried. Thank you very much indeed. We will now move on to item 3.2, 815 Riversdale Road, Camberwell, Siena College Development Plan DP 24/000. Tonight, the officer's report will be presented by Kelly Caparoso, Principal Urban Planner. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. And before Kelly presents the item, I thought just worth mentioning that the application before the UPDC tonight is unusual in that it relates to a development plan, whereas most of the matters that will come to this committee will be planning permits and in some cases amendments to planning permits. A development plan can be applied to specific sites, or a development plan overlay can be applied to specific sites and institutional sites, including private schools in Boroondara. The overlay requires that a development plan must be approved by council before individual permits are issued and considered. A development plan is like a master plan, which sets the medium-term vision for a site in a coordinated and integrated way. Future individual permits must be in accordance with the approved development plans. The intention here is for a broad consideration of staff and student numbers, the location and scale of building envelopes, landscaping and car parking, and these are considered at a strategic level in consultation with the community at that development plan stage. And now we'll turn to Kelly, who will take you through the considerations for the Siena College development plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I present UPDC item 3.2 for the application to amend a development plan for Siena College at 815 Riversdale Road, Camberwell, and 2 Compton Street, Camberwell. It is proposed to amend the existing development plan, which is from 2012, to allow for the construction of a new 3-storey building, pedestrian forecourt, and basement car park. The number of staff is increasing from the 2012 development plan from 82.3 to 94 full-time equivalent staff. The number of students is to remain as 780. The application was placed on public notice and 16 submissions were received. 2 submissions were received after the report was published. The proposed development plan should be supported for the following reasons. The proposed 3-storey Salamanca building replaces an existing 2- and 3-storey building in a similar location. The proposed building's 3-storey height and 9-metre setback from the western boundary was supported in the 2021 BCAT decision. The information demonstrates the proposal would comply with Res Code standards relating to amenity, which include overlooking, overshadowing and visual bulk. These are deemed to comply standards. The proposal provides for 34 additional car parking spaces on site for staff, a total of 113 car parking spaces, and utilises the existing access way from Riversdale Road. The number of car parking spaces is compliant with Clause 5206 car parking and supported by Council's development traffic engineers. Noise attenuation and light spill mitigation measures have been noted on the plans, and this will be required for consideration in the planning permit phase of the development. It is recommended that Council issue to resolve and approve and endorse the amended development plan. Thank you.
Thank you, officers. Tonight, we've got one person who's asked to make a submission. I'm pleased to say it's in support of the recommendation. So I'll call you forward. Again, remind you there's a 3-minute limit, and if you'd start with your name and suburb. So, Sophie Jordan, thank you.
Clearly? Yes, that's better. Sophie Jordan, representing Siena College. I'm a planning consultant, and obviously the college is positioned in Camberwell. Councillors, the school has been part of the community now for just over 84 years. It has developed its campus over a series of stages, and this represents what is effectively the last real opportunity for the school to modernise and improve the education facilities for their current student body. The buildings that are being sought to be replaced are a combination of a 2- and 3-storey building to be combined with the same footprint in the same location of 3 storeys in scale. The building that's being replaced was constructed in the late 1970s. It's been renovated many times. It's been adapted as best as the college can to deal with modern education standards, but as you can imagine, that's a very challenging exercise. The building is no longer fit for purpose in the true sense of the word in 2024. It's not energy efficient, and it doesn't allow the college to be able to move forward with the education of their current student body. This application has been one that we have sought to work very closely with the council over many years. We have sought to submit an application which is respectful of our residential neighbours, particularly to the west, where we abut a number of properties that front on to Wattle Valley Road. The setback of the building, the new building, is significantly greater than existing conditions. The building has been designed to minimise overlooking and, where possible, restrict views into any residential property to the west. It has respected the vegetation that sits along the boundary. It has sought to create a modern building which reflects the character of the campus, several buildings of which are within a heritage overlay. It is not a building that is seeking to increase student numbers or staff numbers. It is a proposal that is designed purely to bring the college education standard up to modern day, and in doing so, provide a building that can also assist the community with additional on-site car parking for staff needs, providing for opportunities for additional landscaping, and treating its boundaries in a manner that will improve residential amenity through the reduction of shadow and improve matters relating to activity around the school campus. We appreciate the opportunity to speak this evening and would be happy to answer any questions of detail if required.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Councillors, are there any questions of this submitter tonight? Councillor Osborne-Smith.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Quick question. You suggested that this was the last opportunity of the school to complete their master plan, so to speak. Is that because there's no more available land, or because you're aware of the school's intentions? Can you perhaps expand on that?
Sure. There's a couple of reasons. The first is in response to your question, yes, there's no more available land. The campus has been relatively stable for a number of decades, but for 3 properties on Compton Street, which the school has actually owned for some time, but not previously used for educational purposes. They went through a substantial development of what's now called the St Catherine's Centre and the Jubilee Building, which is in the northeast corner. That project is finished. They have the convent, which is obviously the most significant heritage building on the site, which has been adapted for educational purposes from what was a working convent. There is nothing further that could or should be done to that building. This building here represents the largest opportunity for renovation of the school facilities. Other parts of the campus are either very valuable open space, already built within a heritage overlay, or have other constraints that wouldn't lend themselves to wholesale redevelopment.
Thank you.
Councillor Bookie.
Good evening, through you, Chair. I'd like to ask a question from the residents' perspective, particularly those residents who are living on the western boundary.
Certainly.
There seem to be some artists' perspectives of the front of the building, but I couldn't quite see one looking on the western side, not in the pack that we received.
Okay.
Maybe you have that. I note that you said that the building will be set back further than the current building. And I note that you also said that there will be a landscape buffer.
Yes.
Could you talk about whether you have plans to to introduce types of trees that will be planted in the landscape that will maximise privacy and will also minimise window light refraction, given that there had already been some concerns from residents around those issues.
Sure. There's a couple of questions in there, so I will attempt, if I forget one part, please let me know. So the building at the moment that's situated in the same position effectively has a service area adjacent to the boundary. It's a combination of a fire stair, waste management area, and it's an area which is effectively concrete and dirt with no vegetation along that edge. The setback of that building ranges between 1.9 and about 8.7 metres. There is a variance in that setback. So by moving the whole building back by 9 metres, a little bit over 9 metres to the building line, it gives an opportunity for that space to be opened up for an opportunity of landscaping as well as moving form away from that boundary. When it comes to landscaping that space, I think it's fair to say the most limiting factor, if I can use that word, is in fact the canopy trees that sit within the neighbours' backyards. And that has been a primary feature of the arboricultural assessment that was done. Vegetation on that boundary needs to be careful not to compete with those trees. It needs to make sure that the setback is respectful of those trees. So the planting in that area will be lower level planting that will sit approximately a mixture of shrubs and medium level plants. The new canopy trees will sit on the northern side of the building around a space which is currently called the Agora, which is an open space area. That we feel is the best opportunity for canopy tree planting. In terms of the building treatment itself, through the consultation process with the community, which is a useful stage to understand key concerns, we were able to appreciate that despite the building being set back 9 metres from the boundary, there was still concern about overlooking into the private open spaces. So we sought to amend the development plan at that point to include notes on the plan, annotations, to say that along that interface, windows above ground level, so it's the first and second floor, would be treated at the permit application stage appropriately to ensure that there weren't downward views into those neighbouring properties. It would be anticipated that screening measure will also assist with what was a concern raised about reflectivity of the glass. There was no intention of a reflective glass treatment, but understand that that has been a concern raised. Whether it be external screening to windows or whether it be an opaque type of glass, the opportunity exists to deal with reflectivity at the same time. It's probably also worth noting that a number of those windows are to be fixed glazing and a number of them are also to be double glazed windows as well. That assists with a combination of sound and it also assists the building from an environmental perspective also.
Thank you. That appears to have exhausted questions. Thank you very much, Ms. Jordan, for your presentation. Oh, one more. Oh, your name had disappeared. You're not allowed. Shoot away. Thank you.
Thank you. You raised the issue of noise as well.
Yes.
And I understand that there will be an acoustic fence along the west side. Can you let me know what consultation you've had with residents around that fence and whether they have some say in its material or whether they're happy about its construction and its height and so on?
Certainly. Without wanting to take the council's too much time this evening, I guess the backstory to the acoustic treatment or acoustic fence on boundary is twofold. One, the existing development plan, which is dated 2012, does refer to acoustic treatment on boundary, so it was a pre-existing feature that the school was quite committed to retain. Secondly, it was a precautionary aspect that came out of an acoustic assessment that the school had undertaken. It's not necessary to deal with noise from classrooms and the like. The fixed double glazing deals with the music rooms appropriately. The treatment on boundary was really just precautionary. So the acoustic treatment to that fence is of a low-level acoustic nature. It's effectively a much better constructed paling fence than a standard fence. It's to have no gaps anywhere between the palings, so they sort of double skin, and it treats the plinth in a more reinforced manner. But for all intents and purposes, it will look like a paling fence. It will maintain the same height, so along that boundary, the existing fence without any trellis ranges between 2 to 2.3 metres. The acoustic fence is to be 2 metres, so it's not greater in scale. Through the consultation process, there were some residents that raised concern about having their fence replaced with a new fence. The school was very clear that that was a cost that they would bear 100%. We had a couple of other residents who requested that the acoustic treatment be extended along the boundary to include their properties, which the school was very happy to do. The development plan was, however, amended to make reference to acoustic treatment on boundary as opposed to acoustic fence. The reason for that was to try and address situations where some residents might say, I don't want a new fence on the boundary. And that's fine. The acoustic benefit of it is, as I say, precautionary only. And for residents who would like the fence to be replaced, it's effectively like for like.
Thank you.
Happy with that response, Councillor Rabuki? Thank you. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Chair, if all questions are exhausted, I would like to move the motion at the appropriate time.
I believe we have reached, well, we're not quite ready for that yet, but thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Jordan, for your presentation tonight. Officers, officer team, are there any responses you wish to make to that?
No, there are not. I think that covered everything.
Thank you very much indeed. We've now got to that point. Councillor Hollingsworth, sorry. Are there any questions of officers before we move forward? Councillor Nolan.
Thank you, everybody. Here's a great opportunity in the non-residential area in relation to the climate action plan that the council has. The climate action plan seeks a 60% reduction by 2030 across the 10 years. And we know that the community emissions in Burundara are 98%. So council corporate emissions are 2%, community emissions are 98%. So here's a great opportunity. Schools are very influential within the community and set examples through many users and many visitors. So I have two questions for the officers. One is, I note the Victorian State School new builds must now be all electric as of early 2024. This is a private school, not a Victorian State school. So can we influence this and recommend this meet the same requirement, i.e. no gas for heating and hot water in the new build? And the second question is to encouraging EV use. So I note in 7.5.2, they refer to a green travel plan, and the Sienna development has 161 bicycle parking spaces, which is great for active transport. Can we encourage EVs by providing, or will we encourage EVs by providing EV charging among the 113 car parks to be built? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nolan.
Thanks, Chair. I might just set the broad context for planning matters in regard to climate action responses, and then Ms. Caparaso will talk specifically about this proposal. The planning scheme guides the decision-making or sets the framework and decision-making for all planning matters in the municipality. And whilst there are broad objectives around responding to the environment and climate, there are not at this point specific controls within the planning scheme that enable us to mandate or require specific climate outcomes in terms of environmental sustainable design measures. The changes that will be needed to the planning scheme to have a decision-making framework is something that this council has been advocating for a number of years. We have worked closely with CASB, which is the Climate Action Sustainable Built Environment Council representative body, and we have worked closely with that group and with 24 other councils to advocate to the Minister for Planning to change the scheme. And this is something that we'll continue to pursue and seek to happen. Without that, we have no formal mechanism to require or mandate specific outcomes. Having said that, Council has engaged an Environmental Sustainable Development Officer within the planning team, and we work with and encourage applicants to include ESD outcomes for their development proposals, for larger development proposals, and we support that through planning conditions, which we follow through on. I'll now hand over Ms. Caparaso to talk specifically about this site.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. In terms of where we're at for a development plan proposal, the DPO doesn't require consideration for ESD, but when a planning permit in the future will be lodged, they will be required to provide a sustainability management plan, which might have a BESS assessment, and a BESS assessment, you get points for certain aspects of an ESD initiative that you put in, and the higher the points, the better your rating is. In terms of having EV, there is some requirements within the National Construction Code for EV, particularly to put the infrastructure in place in the basement for it to be used. So that's something that will come through the National Construction Code. Thank you.
Councillor Nolan, does that satisfy your queries?
Thank you, through your chair. Yes, look, to some extent, I think, I guess I'm flagging that I'm representing community here. I think there's a lot of people here keen to see the council and community hit the targets and do everything we can. And I do hear the limitations on the planning.
Councillor Nolan, have you got any further questions?
No, not really. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There doesn't appear to be any no further questions of officers tonight. Thank you. I think, Councillor Hollingsworth, you were indicating that you're prepared to move a motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would like to support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Sinfield.
Happy to do so.
Is anyone opposed to the motion as put forward? It is unopposed. Councillor Hollingsworth, would you like to speak briefly on the matter?
Thank you, Chair. As a long-term Linden Ward councillor and someone that's had many a visit to Siena College and been aware of the journey that they've been on for many, many years to get to this stage, I have been to many community consultations, information sessions, and reviewed documents, master plan, and just wanted to say that not only do I support this, but I want to acknowledge and applaud Siena College's effort to work with the community to respect the heritage of this amazing education facility. It is a magnificent building with all of its original colsters and chapel and education facilities. And the proposed extensions to the master plan, and in particular the Salmon Marker building, pays homage to the heritage, and yet it's doing so in an architectural exemplar way that will not just service the needs of the school students in the years to come, but for many, many years to come, many decades to come. So without going through everything I did want to say, I just wanted to thank my councillor colleagues for their comments. I also just wanted to say that I know the students at Siena are supported by the teaching fraternity, are what they call eco-warriors, and their mission is to actively work collaborative to brainstorm sustainable environment initiatives. So I'm very confident that what they do will be a highly sustainable built form design. And I commend this to my councillor colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. I presume, Councillor Sinfield, you're happy to leave it at that? Thank you. I will now move to put the motion. All of those in favour? No one's against. No one's abstaining. I declare the motion carried. Thank you very much indeed. We'll now move directly on to item 4, general business. Councillors, are there any matters of general business to be raised tonight? Any items of urgent business? There are none. Confidential business? There are none. Before I close the meeting, I want to thank all of you who have joined us this evening. I declare the Urban Planning Delegated Committee meeting closed. Thank you very much.